Welcome to the Inbound Logistics video podcast series presented by Inbound Logistics Magazine. Today, we're going to be getting some reactions and insights into Inbound Logistics IT Perspective Report for 2023. Our guest today is Dave Brajkovich, Chief Operating Officer for Northstar Digital Solutions, and he'll be sharing his thoughts on how to build a better blockchain. Here's our host, Amy Roach.
Thanks, Jeff, and welcome, Dave. Thanks so much for coming to join us.
Thank you, Amy, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I'm excited to chat with you about all of the advanced technologies that are generating a lot of buzz in the logistics IT world. And we're going to dig into blockchain in a bit, but I just wanted to start out with some sort of background information on the overall technologies that are kind of growing and booming in the supply chain. At Inbound Logistics, we do an annual IT market survey, and this year our respondents were really all about cost. We had 78% of our respondents listing cost reduction as their client's number one logistics and transportation challenge. So what are you seeing from your perspective? Do you agree with that assessment? Is it still all about cost?
I do, Amy. I agree with the cost focus of the economy as it is right now. I think pre-COVID, we had a lot of new business. Certainly, there was a lot of constraints in the supply chain, and that caused an influx of over workload, I guess, to some levels. And of course, revenue was being achieved at higher numbers than most years seen in the past. But now that we're post-COVID and things are getting back to normal slowly and surely, we're starting to see a crunch and a more pressure on cost. As supply chain starts to move, competition is getting greater in the market space, especially in supply chain. We're starting to see that cost is starting to become a factor. Seeing cost within our own industries, we're seeing that optimization, utilizing tech or digitization to help decrease the amount of, call it labor efforts in some areas, but certainly optimizing and keeping up with proficiencies is going to be a big focus of the next years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And that cost reduction obviously is the outcome, not the action. So we're looking at these IT technologies, like you said, to provide visibility and automation that helps ultimately get to that cost reduction factor, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, great. Other top concerns, and you touched on them, but just let's jump in a little bit more. Automation and visibility. Talk a little bit about how these technologies are helping to provide that for companies using them.
Yeah, so automation specifically, there's a very focused point on reducing labor intensive management of paperwork. Certainly in the transportation industry, there's just a lot of paperwork to manage. So having an RPA AI type environment or platform in helping that process from a systems to systems perspective and reducing the amount of labor requirements from an administrative perspective is very key to having the deliverables specifically around managing more of the transactions, less copy paste, more transactional, and keeping up and pace with the speed of the industry demands.
Yeah, and that really helps with scalability also, I would imagine.
Correct. I think it has a real flavor and a real focus on optimizing speed, quality, and error-prone issues that sometimes with human interactions cause. You're going to have a lot more, say, accurate responses utilizing the tools today.
Right. Now, whenever you talk about automation, though, we do have to always make sure people get a little nervous, right? We're not talking about using automation to replace any of this labor, but actually to kind of enhance what companies are already doing on the human side.
Correct. I don't think AI is anywhere close to the Terminator future. We do have definitely a long way to go, but I think where AI, RPA, machine learning is going to help immensely is taking that really labor-intensive process of duplication, repeating the process over and over again, and the frustrations when you're having, let's call it system-to-system interaction. The systems are handling that labor force. So my moniker typically with our people and our clients is utilize AI intelligence to boost human intelligence.
Yeah. So let's jump in then. There's so much buzz around blockchain, but I think people are not that clear. Maybe some people are, but a lot of people are still confused on how it can actually be applied in logistics and transportation. I think you say blockchain, everyone's thinking Bitcoin, but we're talking about secure digital ledgers and things of that nature. So break it down a little bit for us. How do you use blockchain in the supply chain, and what is Northstar offering in that area?
Sure. So going back quite a few years, blockchain's been around. A buzzword's been around for many years, and I think initially it was a hot topic, and I don't think people really understood what blockchain was all about. It was built exactly to your point, and from a digital security perspective and connecting chains. We call it a trust chain. It is a digital, let's call it a ledger, that keeps transactions very immutable and to the point. So if we're interacting on a blockchain, those transactions are captured. There's security around the transactions. And of course, there is a community behind it where there's computers and there's very smart logic that's managing those. And there, in some cases, smart contracts are applied as well. So that the negotiations and the systems are understanding what transactions are viable and which ones are not. That said, financial institutions, fintechs, and of course Bitcoin, Ethereum, all of those that we know well and near and dear to our hearts these days, we're a major user of the blockchain at that time. But since that time, blockchain has been and evolved to basically track products and services. And lineage is really critical, and larger companies like the Walmarts of the world and Costco's and anyone that's retail that's selling products that they don't manufacture enjoy, and sometimes in some cases from a security perspective need to have that type of historical information, that in case something happens, the traceability is there. So going back to the term from seed to fork, should something happen, there is almost instantaneous, call it logging and or retrieval of information in where to kind of stop the bleeding immediately, so that people don't get hurt and they're safe, and things are taken off the shelf appropriately. In the days before blockchain, that was a very difficult process to manage.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really key.
Yeah.
And then all of this going on, what's happening on the back end? API connections, how are things being transacted through these blockchains, from the back end perspective?
Yeah. So the way we've looked at blockchain, we built our own hyperledger within the Northstar Digital Solutions platform. We worked with some very prominent partners like IBM to develop a hyperledger. Basically on a private blockchain, and our use case was to allow us to transact from a system to system perspective. So we call it an A to A. You can go directly, but having the middle layer of the blockchain as a hyperledger to track everything that's happening has been very beneficial in reconciliation processing. So we include our partners as a direct connection, where we have APIs from our system to the blockchain, and then from there, from the blockchain to their system. Meaning, although we use different ERP systems or TMS systems, it doesn't really matter, because the mapping within the middleware of the blockchain hyperledger, my A is your A. So on that basis, we transact on a very common language thread. We also introduce smart contracts, which we've made agreements in pricing, deliveries, everything that goes with it. Also documentation. It is a vault for documentation. So in our world, with some of our clients, they do cross-border transactions. Very key to the process is to make sure customs border documentation is part of the process. And of course, the accountability goes back to the client to make sure that we have those documents and freight won't move. Again, we take it seriously when we take a piece of freight on. It's custodial ownership. And we own the we take custodial ownership of the freight. So we're taking care of it, making sure it gets where it needs to go and damage free, and also providing visibility and insights. So through API connections and through the Hyperledger, transactions are flowing through that process seamlessly. And also then the third party that's introduced is the customer itself, and they could see real time what's happening through the timestamps.
Right. Okay. And that seamlessness seems really key too, because there's so many different systems and tools that are being used. Like, you mentioned ERP and TMS, and obviously every company, or not, companies are using all different kinds of those. So I imagine that kind of is like levels the complexity a little bit.
It does. It really takes out the human factors out of the process, because the systems are managing and they're expecting certain amount of data to pass through. As well as some security processes where the transactions are secure. They're not in the open public. And also, there is pieces of identity management processing through that process as well. So the entire gamut of transparency is there. There's really nothing to hide. Don Tapscott is, I call him kind of the godfather of blockchain. He's written many books. His claim to fame and basically something that resonated with me is he basically says exercise is not an option when you're on the blockchain, because you're basically naked to the transactional world. So you better look good.
Right.
And I think that transparency is all about proper customer service and management. People aren't perfect, neither are systems. And if processes and services don't happen in the way they should, the client should be informed.
Yeah.
Again, in the consumer world, it's very similar. If you're buying something from Amazon, the expectation is that you're going to get some type of tracking number for your product, which you really want next day if you can.
Yeah,
but if not, then you want to be able to have that notification and that visibility throughout that whole process. And even if it's going to be late, you can at least plan your day, or at least understand when that product will arrive at your doorstep.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good way to put it in that perspective from a personal point of view also. Helpful. And I think another thing is, security and privacy. Obviously, anytime you're talking about this kind of data is important. So talk a little bit about the difference between the private blockchains and the public blockchains, and where we're heading with all of that.
So private blockchains have been really in fold for the last few years. There has been a push towards revolutionizing the internet as a whole. So there's the term called Web3, which has been propagated over the last few years. And the Web3 is going to allow people to actually use identity management or tokenization. I don't know if people really understand what tokenization means, but and I'll put it in more layman's terms, it's like a Visa card on steroids. All of us as consumers have a Visa card. It has an identity process which is secure. You have a CVV number, or a secure number on that card that is given to you in your own personal identity. At the same time, you can go into any store, any retailer, and present the Visa card with security that the owner, selling you the products is somewhat assured that it is your Visa card, and that you're capable to pay. And of course, that approval process goes through. Now, with tokenization, it's more than that. It is your personal data on the internet. In today's world, you've got, the Facebooks and LinkedIn's, and whenever you share social media, it is a shared environment. I'm not saying they're going, they're giving out these private information. However, those big conglomerates have used personal data of people out there and monetizing it around the world, and sharing it in some cases, but also benefiting from it. So in the case of Web3, you almost become a bubble in a call it a hyper tunnel, where your bubble's small or large, but it's your data. And then in turn, that data can be sold, or there could be interest from other parties to say, well, Amy, you've done some incredible transactions with some companies, or your skill set is very sought after. Within that tokenization, you can separate some of that data and actually monetize it to some level for others to use in a beneficial way. Of course, also the security around those bubbles is very tight, and it's encrypted, so that when you're doing transactions with other parties on a Web3 chain, your personal identity is assuring who you are. There's also confidence in the level of your transactions, what you've done, and your history, but also at the same time, it provides that data as you choose to share it, to manage transactions in a very trustworthy way.
Okay, great. Thank you for breaking that down. I think there is a lot of confusion there. And you say Web 3.0. I don't know if anyone knows what to make of that. So important information for sure. Tell me a little bit in terms of, if you're a company listening here and you want to kind of get started on all this and you're taking in all this information, a little overwhelmed, a little confused. What are some of the first steps? What can you do to jump into this? What do you need to have maybe from technology on the back end, infrastructure requirements? How do you get started?
I think the future is interoperability, connections. We hear the word integration, but what does that truly mean? So again, having supply chains, commercial industries that want to do business, it's almost table stakes for being able to do business online, like with an Amazon or a Walmart. The large conglomerates there, they demand interoperability and integration. So the first step to really try to include yourself in those chains is to basically have a framework that you can connect your systems. I think if you're starting out a business and you have no systems, it's going to be very difficult to do business unless you're, a garage shop owner that you have to do physical stuff with. People need to bring products to you. But if you're online and if you're trying to manage service and products in that forum, systems that you're going to need are going to have some integration capabilities. And I'm talking about APIs. API connections and capabilities are almost, again, table stakes and industry best practices nowadays, so that you can integrate order management, you can integrate billing, you just make it easy to do business with you. So those areas there are going to be critical to successful business operations in the future. And the ones that are not there are going to have some struggles. However, there are many, many companies out there today, and I think there's a plethora of them. I can't really subscribe or prescribe anybody specifically, but you want to look for companies that can offer these types of solutions that have integrated APIs that you don't have to do that yourself. We do at Northstar. We have our own enterprise service bus, and we have developers writing those scripts and codes. However, in this day and age, you can have software that has embedded APIs that they can actually do the connections natively to, the internet, or in the future Web3 platforms. So that, I think, is the first step. And then, of course, moving forward, and as you advance, to keep labor costs down to a degree and allowing humans to actually do intelligent work, you want to be able to utilize automation like an RPA or in a machine learning type environment, where the systems can actually talk to one another. The days of having 15 systems open at the same time, first of all, very frustrating for a human being or a user to do that. Where systems today can interact in that process very easily. And so that would be the kind of the second step. And then, of course, the third step in advancements is actually looking at blockchain type platforms where you can interact. And there are plenty of them. There is one, and I will refer to them because they're really starting to break out in the supply chain, and that's Healy Labs. They have a lot of capital venture behind them. They have some great idea. They have open source platforms where if you're not a developer, that's okay. It doesn't matter, because the community is working towards, again, immutability, same time security, but also bringing on a lot of business management there. There's over 2.1 billion transactions happening on there right now. Wow. And in the supply chain world, that's very, very important, so that you can get on board and basically have almost that platform be your sales agent in allowing you open opportunities to do business with shippers, manufacturers, and other carrier supply chain partners within that platform, and safely too.
Got it. Okay, great advice. As we wrap up, I'd love it if you could take a few minutes to share or walk us through a customer example that kind of highlights, how you can use blockchain to drive benefits and efficiencies to get that automation and scalability in logistics challenges using blockchain.
So one of our customers through Northstar Digital Solutions, we embarked on the Hyperledger, of course, for blockchain perspective. And our use case was not necessarily financial, but it was more around transactional smoothness the reconciliation process. So again, in the past, it was really more through chains of emails, managing orders through independent TMS systems, where one system may not have the same identification or formats as the other.
Mhm.
And then, of course, the invoicing and the processing is very complicated. So our customer was looking to reduce that footprint. They were moving, anywhere from 60 to 100 hours a month into just managing, call it bills or invoices through statements. And to go through those statements, they're, like about 100 pounds thick. And you've got to go through each one of them. So now with the use case that we have for this client on the Hyperledger, we connect them through the Hyperledger, and basically all the transactions are captured.
Mhm.
So that everything that happens throughout those transactions for orders is captured. So if you're adding, let's say, accessorials, or if you're adding any type of additional invoicing that was originally different from the quote, that is all captured in real time and has descriptions and information and approvals throughout that process. So that at the end of the day, when those transactions are completed, the customer is notified immediately, invoices are updated immediately. We don't wait a week or two to process them. And at the same time, then as that comes through, the invoices from the partners can come through to the client, our client, or the receiver. They're paying it on the basis that all of the transactions have happened and the ledger is up to date. So there's no people touching it. So that's a reduction of a massive amount of hours. This client saved anywhere from 60 to 80 hours a month.
Wow.
And you can imagine that impact. And now the people are allowed, can really focus on exceptions, like real exceptions, and really take the time to actually find out what those exceptions are. But the normal, we call it straight through process, or STP, is generally managed at 80 to 90% throughout the process and reconciles. People get their money, people get paid, and everything's aligned to the ledgers as it needs to be. So that was our use case in a big way. Of course, in all the real-time visibility for every transaction is tracked and propagated throughout the system, and also the client is notified of any changes. And even when the deliveries are happening, all the documentation is available immediately for them.
Fantastic efficiencies there.
Yes.
Great. I think anyone listening who's running an accounting department is probably wanting to give you a call right about now, Dave.
Yeah, please do. We're certainly now, I think, over the last 4 years, become quite, a savvy expert in that area. We've gone through the throes. We did some, 6 to 8 weeks of value stream mapping. So it wasn't an easy process.
Yeah.
And of course, we still can do better. And we're always evolving that process. And of course, we're looking to connect the trust chain through many, many other relationships with customers and partners.
Great. Great. Well, thanks again, Dave, for your time. I really appreciate it. You did a great job of taking a really complex subject and breaking it down for us. So thanks again for being with us.
You're most welcome, Amy. Thank you again.
Absolutely.
Thank you to Dave and to Northstar Digital Solutions for all of that information. For anyone who wants to find out more, go to northstardigital.solutions. And thank you for watching this Inbound Logistics video podcast. For more episodes, go to www.inboundlogistics.com/podcast.